Hey, what's going on, guys? So we have made it to episode 9 of the free 3D modeling course, and the only pieces I think that we have left to make are this little window and this double pieced clip we see right here. Actually triple pieced, 1 piece, 2 piece, and 3 pieces. So we'll go ahead and try to make that first. Let's see if we can get an angle of how this is formed. In this one, it sort of clips into the bottom of this, but we're going to go ahead and take a creative liberty and just put it below it so we don't have to turn off the mirror modifier for now. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually make a cube. And on second thought, it might be easier to just grab these and turn them into a plane for now. So I'm just going to scale this around and see how far I can get to the shape I'm imagining in my head. I notice it comes out about halfway. And it's about the same bottom edges here. On the bottom side, I imagine it would end somewhere right here with proportional editing off and maybe 1 loop cut. So I'll add a loop cut and I'm going to bring this vertex back and I'll push this one outwards. And in X-ray mode, it seems like we can make this one wider and then bring a vertex in and bevel this whole edge. Now we get that sort of curve. Now if we put a control loop here, and I'll show you a quick trick. When you have an edge loop selected, you can press E to make it match one side or the other, and you can press F to flip that. So first let's extrude the whole thing down. And I'll press A and Alt N and flip those normals. With X-ray view off, I can check this out and then extrude it up. How are we feeling about that? Not too bad at all. Might move this in a little bit more. And I might also round these corners out. But we'll have to apply the scale. Remember what I said about some tools not working correctly if the scale isn't applied? If I apply that scale and then try to bevel again, it'll behave appropriately. Maybe I'll even grab this edge, bring it back, and I'll bevel these 2 corner edges. That looks pretty good for this piece. I'll shade auto smooth and we can leave that one alone. And now this second piece is literally just a cylinder. So I'm going to grab a cylinder. We'll keep it at 24. I'll shade it to auto smooth and I'll squash it down. Let's see if we could use the X-ray view and one of these images to find the right location for it. Scale it down, scale it up on the Z axis, and I'll bring it out. And it looks like it is the apex of that curve, so I'm sure somewhere around here is perfectly fine. Now I'm going to do something kind of weird to be able to get the start of this shape, and that is to duplicate this cylinder. I'm going to duplicate it for now. I just press Shift D and then right click to bring it back to position. I'll go into edit mode and scale it up. Let's see how much we need to scale it up. I'm going to isolate this really quick to see where we need to be. And we're actually in the right spot. We just need to bring these bottom edges down. And so I'll add some loop cuts right around here where the original one was. Maybe a little bit larger. And I'll delete these faces. Now I can fill in the bottom faces and continue on from there. So we have room above this circular notch to be able to create the rest of the piece. And the way I'll do that is, I think I just want to grab these faces here and I'm going to extrude them outwards. I'm going to scale them S, Y, and 0. I'll scale them inwards and I'll bring them out to the right on the X-axis. Now I can get a control loop here and a control loop here, and I'll press double G and then E like I showed you before, and it should match the topology of that perfectly. So the way we can bridge these 2 edge loops is by deleting them, and then I'm going to take the edges of these and bridge them together in this order. Because sometimes the loop tool's bridge method does not always work. And now I can cap off these outer edges. We can even isolate this really quickly. So I'll press F a couple times to start capping that off, bring it back through the other side, and then this and this can be connected. So this would be the topology of our shape. I'll press Alt H to bring everything back, hide this image. Now we can extrude it further. And when we look at the reference image, we notice that it does match the shape of the bottom of this area. So that's what we're going to try to emulate. We'll just grab the front ones here, bring them back. We'll check this corner. And now when we extrude it again, what we could do is go into edge select mode. And I'll grab these edges and press Shift S, cursor to selected. Now I can grab these, and in 3D cursor pivot mode, I can drag it down. I'm going to try to see where our version is. Our version is a little further back. And then with that, I think we can just extrude it forward. Now we'll take these faces in the middle and scale them in because I want a little bit of room for beveling on the side. I'll even take the totality of these faces and scale them inwards. Let's see where it is on the front view. Yeah, so it's a little behind, but it goes out towards the edge. And we'll go out of X-ray mode to make sure that we're flush against that edge. I think instead of moving it out this way, we should move the whole object out. And the same would go for this cylinder. So first I'll flatten this. And we'll be able to scale this in just a little bit, along with these faces here. I can now grab these sides and bevel them. So let's just make sure we match the height of everything correctly. I'll grab these bottom edges and Shift S to cursor to selected, scale them inwards. I can lift this one up. And I can drag it back just to make sure we're matching everything. And now we can even add a slight bevel to this one with like 3. And I'll do the same thing to this side. Now when we hide the cutters, we have all these pieces pretty much ready to go. And we can just create the last little bit of detail for this window. After that, we'll get into the optimization phase so that you can clean this model up for a final render, and it'll look good enough for you to share with your friends, or use in your game, or use in an animation. I can promise you that. But if you want to learn the actual texturing and realistic rendering side of things, you got to make sure to subscribe so we can make another course. Alright, so let's just create an edge loop in here, and I'll press Ctrl B. I want to create a little bit of a pocket in here, and I'll press Alt E and extrude these faces along the normals. Because we're back in subdivision mode, we're going to have to select these edges, and we're going to have to crease them. So I'll set them to 1, and I'll also press Ctrl E and set them to sharp. And we can check that out. And it might not be that thick in real life, but I don't mind working with something of those proportions. So we're going to grab all these middle edges now and press Shift D. I'll press P to separate that selection. Now I have this outer ring, and I could slightly scale it inwards. And so what we have to do on each side now is just fill in the glass. So I'll press F, and I'll press F. And because this is a completely flat surface, I'll press Alt N to flip these. We could start making some cuts potentially and find out what we need to turn this into a round object. And I'm gonna have to use some elbow grease to sort of tackle this. So I'm pressing K and pressing Enter over and over, but I'm not going to get these very shallow vertices. Instead, we're going to create loop cuts and then join them together right there. So I skipped over it, but I used my knife tool to just fill out this N-gon face that we created right here at the center, because I'm not entirely sure if this is bulging or not, but if it is, I think I just want to grab these outer edges and then scale them slightly outwards. And if that is the case, then I would recommend you going through that. So that is something I was kind of looking for. So I'll press A and then S and Y and scale the whole thing in. And in object mode, I'll press Alt H, and I'm getting that little bit of curvature I was looking for. So I noticed we missed a, small but fun and slightly significant detail, which is this cable. And I think it provides a good opportunity for us to learn about curves. So I want us to go ahead and do that. First, we got to create this crazy shape that is holding the wire. I'm just going to hide everything, Shift C to reset my cursor, and I'm going to add a circle. I think in this scenario, 24 is actually completely fine. What we're going to do is we're going to go into edit mode. I'm going to delete these vertices, and I'm going to move these ones out just a little bit. I'll add a mirror modifier. Oh, it looks like it wants it on the y-axis. And so I'll extrude these vertices in and make sure that clipping is on. And we're already getting the base of the shape, so if I extrude it out, I can press fill, and I can extrude this up. And now I can get another circle that is 16 in the vertices. And I'll drag it up and I'll make it smaller and put it over here. Now I can just go to edit mode and fill this in with E, S, M, and merging it at the center. I'm going to press A, Alt N, I know it's like rocket science, to flip those normals. And I'm going to press E to extrude it all the way through. Looks like I'll flip those normals again. So I'm going to press Control A to bring all the transforms back to the center, because when I press the mirror modifier for this one, I want it to go to the other side of the y-axis. So that also looks really good. I'll just apply it. And I'll shade these to auto smooth, and I'll shade this one to auto smooth. Maybe I can make these cylinders with the individual origins pivot a little bit bigger, so it's scaling both of those. Now if I go to the original base model, I'll type in Boolean, and I'll select our cutter object. All I have to do now is, as you can see, I'm a little bit crazy because as you can see, I'm a little bit crazy because I could have just put the Boolean above the mirror, and then we don't even need this second cylinder. So now that that's active, we can check out the Boolean, the difference is working, and I'll just apply it. Now we can delete this, and this is a good enough model for our purposes. We could go to the top view and press KAC to cut the knife all the way through, and then we can add an edge loop and grab the middle vertices, make them smaller on the x-axis so that we have that cool little ridge at the top of those. Now I'm going to unhide everything except the images, and we're looking at this. I'm going to make this way smaller, and I'll do the same thing and duplicate this. Actually, instead of duplicating, let me delete that and press Alt D instead to create an instance link of it. And if I really want to make these holes smaller, I can change the transform orientation to local, and I can go into the middle edge ring and press S, Shift Z, and it's still on that same original axis, so we can make this smaller. We're just putting this in a place we think looks nice, and then we'll get our first curve. So let's go ahead and add our first curve. We'll press Shift A, and we'll go to curve, and let's pick a Bezier curve. Sometimes you could pick a path, but it depends on what mood you're in. They work just the same. I went into edit mode, and I'm going to turn off individual origins and go to medium point. We could literally just grab it and start rotating it until it's in a position we like. And so it seems like we might have to add one more cutter to this for this small hole, so I'll just get a new cylinder, and 16 should be perfectly fine. I'll set it to auto smooth, and I'll rotate it 90 degrees, and I'm going to bring it over here, turn on our images, and we're getting into a bit of a better spot. So let's find our cylinder now. Now I'll go back to global, move this back through the x-axis, turn off x-ray so we can see what we're doing. Now I'll press S and X. Let's scale it out. Cool, and I'm just going to rotate it for a little bit more of a natural curvature. And now I'm just going to join it with this, and if I hide it, it should make a hole. So if you don't know how that worked, just go back to the previous chapter where I taught you about the Boolean operations, and you'll understand that if you join objects together, you can make all sorts of cutter shapes, and then this base shape will have a Boolean modifier, and you'll be able to cut shapes out just like we did with this one. So let's finally fit in our curve. I'm going to get our first point and just grab it and rotate it around. So moving this first point in, and we'll pretend this curve faces this way and extrudes in, just to provide that little extra detail on the side. And as you can see, it's getting like loop-de-loop, and that's because these green handles are really large. So all we can do is press S, and it'll scale those handles down, and it should be able to help us a lot. This handle is also really large, so we need to scale these down. And we'll get this point, and we'll start making a trail with extruding and scaling these little sidebar handles. So I'm going to see which way this faces, and we know that it should fit throughout the first hole of this accessory. So let's go back. We'll extrude it through. We'll extrude it through the second one as well. We're going to rotate it around, maybe make this handle smaller. And it has a bit of a bend to it, so let's hope we get that with our second extrusion. And we'll fit this through here too. Through one of these first holes. And now we're just going to make a ring around this. So after we made this notched button, there's a little bit of a gap between there, and we're just going to sort of draw a circle around this. And once we place a point, we'll see how big the handle needs to be. We can even turn on X-ray mode to make sure we're not getting too crazy. So I'll click both of these points, and I'll click subdivide, and that'll give us a point between there, so we can start getting a better curvature and shape. And we know we should be a little bit finicky because it doesn't go in front of this button. I'm excited to be almost done with the entire modeling phase, that's for sure. So I'm rotating, finding the right angle, and then once I do, I extrude another one, and I rotate it. And we're just figuring out where in the 3D space it lies best. So now that we're close back to the original, we're just going to kind of give the illusion of closure by bringing it back to near one of the original points. And we'll have it look like that. I don't mind moving this point and maybe moving this piece. Moving it out. Let's check on that, and that looks pretty cool. I don't want any clipping around here, so I'll move this around here. And we have 0 to no clipping. We might have clipping in a second unless we rotate this, because we just want to make sure when we solidify it, it doesn't clip through these curves. Alrighty. And alrighty. So now with your curve selected, a new panel popped up down here for curve data. And we're going to go hunt down the geometry section. And there's a ton of options, but we don't need to really worry about any of them except for the bevel depth. So once I make that a little larger, and I'm holding shift to be able to get smaller increments, I'm pretty satisfied with 0.1. If we want to change the resolution, we can go to these top sliders, and it'll give us more resolution in either direction. I think I am okay with 12, and I think that looks good from a far distance too. Sometimes you might get a little bit attached to your curves, and you might want to go back and edit them. For example, I'm going to do that right now and make sure this looks a little bit better. But once you're near the final phase, for example, now I'm satisfied with how this looks, I'm going to press Ctrl A and click on Visual Geometry to Mesh. So that just took away the curve data, and if I go into edit mode, it is a cylindrical type of mesh now. So it's a very finalized type of option, but you can still move things by selecting a piece and going into proportional editing and moving it back. So there's still room to make fine edits. And of course in the mesh mode now you can make crazy different types of selections onto these curves and build a giant dragon monster, but most of the time I just convert it to a curve and call it a day. So that is all of our objects complete, and it's looking really good. We won't have to obsess over optimization. I'll discuss the concepts before moving on to the next video, but what I'm looking at here is a pretty finely tuned model, except if I go into edit mode, there are just a lot of edges that we can potentially get rid of. I'm not going to make this course an hour long and tell us to dissolve 1,000 different edges, but if there are some things we can learn from and things we can say that'll make it more optimized, then I think it's worth going through. For example, I remember on these buttons, we added the bevel modifier, and because it's low poly, I don't think I want that anymore, because I want to show you a different solution to adding bevels to low poly models that'll kind of blow your mind, because I knew it blew my mind. So at this angle, I don't like that this curve is over here, so I'm going to go into proportional editing. We'll just make it sneak on inside of there, and that's completely fine to me. And so we have decent low poly edges on the rest of these screws, and we did pick a decent poly count size for them, but there's further optimization we can do, especially for flat models. So for example, this big button, if I go into edit mode, we do have extra loops that have nothing to do with anything until I click on A, and then I can go to mesh. I'll drag this down, and in the cleanup section, I'm looking for limited dissolve, and that took out a lot of the edges that we had no use for. It's worth confirming that For low poly models, they do triangulate themselves before they go to the game engine, but this is a completely separate workflow than starting from scratch in a sub-D modeling type of mindset. When you have a model like this, there's the potential to retopologize it afterwards with complete sub-D methods, but to be completely honest, those methods, I wouldn't consider them out of date. However, with newer methods like the one I'm going to show you with the bevel shader, it's totally possible to have these limited dissolve type meshes and then just use the bevel shader to bring out those specular highlights that I'll also discuss near the end of the course. That might be a little bit advanced to talk about, but if we were going true subdivision surface the whole time, we would get microscopic little bevel shines across all of these edges. However, it takes a lot more time, and that's why in this beginner modelers course, I wanted us to discuss the brute force methods to create the model and actually get some confidence in building shapes. So to recap, it's totally viable to build it like this. It's totally viable to take away triangles and quads like this. And for rendering purposes, it's a-okay. You can triangulate it for the engine, and if you want this higher fidelity for subdivision, then it's time to retopologize, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So take that home to your mama, and let's just take another look at what else we can optimize. So I know we have a lot of edges here, and basically the whole point of this operation, which I'm not going to time lapse through, I'm just going to skip over eventually, is to grab vertices that don't contribute to the silhouette. It's like, why is this one here? We can turn off proportional editing, and I'll press double G to slide everything down. Because when did we need these edges to change one of the shapes? So we don't have to do this to all of them, but for some typically egregious models, like if we isolate this one, there's just a lot of edges that I don't feel like we ended up using, but I will be careful because subdivision surface is on. Again, it's all a dance. I recommend you Google things. I recommend you learn more. And this course is really just the tip of the iceberg. We can do 1,000 more things with these models, and that's what makes you a good 3D designer. So feel free to ask questions. Feel free to bug my Discord, and you have done excellent modeling all of these pieces. So in the next episode, I'll go over a quick preview of just me optimizing this model really quick, and then we're going to go over the shading and rendering for a quick preview like image that you'll be able to share with everyone. So amazing, amazing work. I will see you super soon.